Yo, what's good? Welcome back to Just King's World. On my hip hop ish, we present to you Dope Read. Dope Read is a series of dope books that you need to be up on, that you need to definitely add into your arsenal to increase your thought process in your mind. Today, we're going to read chapter 1 of Chainz's new book titled The Voice in My Head is God. Let's get into it. Shout out to Black Privilege Publishing. The voice in my head is God. 2 Chainz with Derek Harrell. Dedicated to his pops. Let me first read this. If you wrote an autobiography, you've had to sue yourself. Your lying ass. Where you been? One who said that. That was a quotation. Okay, let's get into it. Man, book look good, man. Book's official. Hold on, before we get into anything, what is this? This is not okay. Before we get into chapter 1, he has a section that it's called Something Told Me. Let me read it to you. Something told me. Something told me to put the money in my sock. Something told me it was too good to be true. Something told me to make that left turn. Something told me to pass on that vacation. Something told me women are born superheroes. Something told me my mom could raise a man. Something told me my mom knew things. Something told me not to take all the weed to school. Something told me my wife sensed something. Something told me women are born intuitive. Something told me not to borrow another nigga's scale. Something told me that scale had bad juju. Shout out to Juju Water. Something told me a red polo can get you caught. Something told me not to trust the law. Something told me Alabama State was the place. Something told me psychology was my passion. Something told me I need to find a plug. Something told me to stay within my own frequency. Something told me I was different from most. Something told me I was more gifted than most. Something told me them cops would crash our crib. Something told me not moving was actually a move. Something told me everything happens for a reason. Yeah. What you think that something was that told him that? I know. It was God. Let's keep going. Something told me loyalty is foundation. Something told me to pass on the deal. Something told me to understand the music game. Something told me I needed to get out of my deal. Something told me to understand my value. Something told me to call it based on a true story. Something told me I'll figure it out on the fly. Something told me I was molded by the South Side. Something told me real legends don't die. Something told me 2 Chainz will become legendary. Something told me my name is my brand. Something told me I needed my own studio. Something told me never wait on nobody. Something told me Old National was natural. Something told me to stop trapping cold turkey. Something told me to watch the company I kept. Something told me to keep God first. Something told me God was inside my head. Something told me God is love. Something told me to keep my pops close. Something told me do it big. Something told me the Cali wind was too still. Something told me to invest what I make. Something told me to connect with a young lady I just met. Something told me to know the heartbeat of the people. Something told me to always be the real me. Something told me that eyes were on me. Something told me to wear Balenciaga. Something told me to wear Bottega. Something told me to wear Rick Owens. Something told me to wear both chains. Something told me my health was a receipt. Something told me something told me to get my annual physical every top of the year. Something told me to treat everything I do with integrity. Something told me I was born connected. Something told me to sleep on planes. Something told me to enjoy the ride. Something told me that in the end, God will always decide. I like this so far. All right, part 1, Hope Scholarship. Tell the truth will set you free and give you victory. Pops, in a prison letter. All right, so we're going into chapter 1. Chapter 1 is entitled Shoot Him in the Stomach and Let God Decide. My opportunity to attend an HBCU happened. I was originally planning on going to the University of Memphis, but as you'll read, due to unforeseen circumstances, something happened to change my course. I was offered a scholarship to Alabama State University, ASU, after high school. I had friends and other folks I knew from home who went there. ASU was an obvious transition from a good number of us because it's only 2 hours from Atlanta. I moved to Montgomery after a summer of hustling. I'm talking morning till night, trapping, street life, whatever it took. The summer before college, me and my homeboy, Shy, took turns trapping. We hooped and we trapped. That was it. That was the gospel. Every day we'll hoop in at different apartments. This when real hoopers moved throughout the city to test their game out. Real hoopers walked into somebody else's neighborhood and took over the courts. This was one of the ways to make a name for yourself. The more you prove you were willing to lock horns with anybody from anywhere, the more your reputation rang through the city. We had a 24-hour basketball facility called Run and Shoot on Metropolitan Parkway. Everybody from Atlanta knows about Run and Shoot. Even if it was 4 in the morning, you could leave a crap game or a friend's house and go play basketball because it was open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Lord knows who you might run into depending on what time you pulled up. Run and Shoot had about 16 full courts, a track and a gym and a place to eat. The And1 phenomenon Hot Sauce used to damn near spend the night in that motherfucker. Him and a lot of other folks honed their skills there. It was actually a dream concept, and it kept a lot of us out of trouble. Instead of getting into trouble or going to Waffle House and wilding out, we can pull up and play ball no matter what time it was. Another way to make a name for yourself was trapping. Walk in somebody else's neighborhood and take over the trap. I happened to be great at hooping and trapping. Me and Shy never hooped together because somebody had to stay in the trap. If he was out on the courts, I'll be back at the trap and vice versa. I was a much better hooper than Shy, but I understood him wanting to go out and get his shots up. I knew my game had to be right for college, but the streets still had a lot of things that I was looking for. People, power, money. I had been moving packs and already been locked up a few times. I was 18. My pops was locked up and me and my mom landed in College Park. You should know, College Park can put something different in your blood and teach you different ways of how to move. When I got to Montgomery, my chest was real big. My chest was real big city-like. Like since I was from Atlanta, I was from the future. I had been hip on cutting-edge fashion, lingo, and trapping. I was a time traveler, wanting to see what Alabama had for me. Coming from the mud, I had always knew how to get it from the mud. If you don't pay attention, you'll miss it. You won't get it. I always known that if I was born in Colorado, I would have been the best snowboarder in the world. That if I was born in Hawaii, I would have been the best surfer in the world. But I was raised in College Park, Georgia. So by the time I got to college, I was the best hustler in the world. I learned to adapt and thrive in my environment. I became a master of the art of survival. I used to think it was a game. I used to think it was the game I learned from the voices around me growing up that made me one of the biggest pieces on the chessboard. Those voices were the folks in my neighborhood. Sometimes they came from a man down the street or a woman on the corner store, at the corner store. Sometimes they came from one of my homeboys or a neighborhood old head. Sometimes they came from the gas station attendant who'd be like, be safe out here, or so on and so, was just here looking out for you. Sometimes they came from my mama's boyfriend who called me Killer or Ty. Since I was young, voices had always spoke to me and wrapped me like a fur coat in the middle of winter. Voices had always tried to protect me. I soon learned there was always another voice looking to break through. A voice I didn't know what to do with or how to decipher. There had always been another voice coming from a higher place, a higher plane. Sometimes when that voice came to me, I talked back. I can't lie. Sometimes my mom probably thought I was tripping, asking herself, why is my son in his room talking to himself? Ha. College was the start of a new chapter. I was at ASU to hoop. At this particular time, I think I declared my major was computers or computer programming. Here I am, a freshman. The coaches were compassionate about me getting arrested for selling weed. The acadone Don Oliver was huge, which I saw on my initial visit. I couldn't wait to hoop in there. I had 3 cars at the time, a box Chevy, a Cadillac DeVille, and a Ford Expedition. Despite being on a scholarship when I first got to Montgomery, I did what I knew. I hustled. I sold ounces of mid for like $50. It was actually a nice little hustle because people thought they were getting a deal when actually I was shorting them on the grams. The packs was only like 25 grams, but for some reason nobody ever complained. I don't know if it was because I had a different kind of vibe that they were used to or something else. Either way, it was a win-win to me. They got new work, I got paid. Everybody left the situation happy. My roommate was my guy, Robert. Robert got to ASU a year before me. He was one of the biggest reasons I committed to going there. Me and Robert played ball in high school together. When I talked to him about the opportunity to play at ASU, he vouched for the school and the team. Yeah, man, it's cool down here. We got a nice little team, and niggas from Atlanta got plenty love down here. They spoke to me. The first couple of weeks of the semester, me and Robert shared a little dorm room. It was quaint, not much to it, your typical dorm room. It worked for us. We didn't do too much besides chill around the student union, eat good food, and hoop. I ran my little money plays, and that was pretty much life at the start of the semester. Everything was fine until the damn toilets on our floor overran and flooded everything. I mean, everything. People were mad as hell, and me and Robert weren't an exception. I mean, folks were duck walling in sandals, splashing water all throughout the damn floor. It got real nasty real fast. Shit became a mess. Me and Robert had to figure something out. We had only been living there a couple weeks, but it definitely was no place for a player like me on my Ralph Lauren polo collection. When maintenance came through, they said it would take a couple of weeks to get everything back in order. Man, hell nah. That wasn't going to work. We had to do something. I had to put my pack selling money to work. We had to move off campus. And that's exactly what we did. We moved and got a smooth little apartment not too far from everything. We were comfortable, and the basketball season hadn't started yet. I was going to classes dressed in fly, wearing fly cologne, and riding fly whips. I drove 3 different cars every week, hung around the yard, mingled with the ladies, sold some weed, and even gambled. It actually was real fun. I built relationships and watched some grow fast. It felt like a long way from Atlanta, farther than a couple hours. Thinking back, it actually was due to its different pace. If I viewed myself as a time traveler from the future, I had started to learn and enjoy my temporary home. Things were simple. Not much to choose from, not much going on. There were a few local eateries, hangout spots, and entertainment places. It was nothing like Atlanta, nothing like a big city. But it had slowly started to grow on me. And even though I had only been in Montgomery for a little over a month, it had started to feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. ASU was one of those campuses that the community flocked to. It didn't matter if you were a student or not. Hanging out on campus or around the student union was the place for the city. You see a lot of locals hanging out, banging music, or shooting their shot to see if a vulnerable ear might be open to game. That was life. One afternoon, me and Robert were hanging out near the union, and Robert told me some locals wanted to talk to me. He said they had something they thought I might be interested in, rims. Brian and them said they got some rims for like 500. Robert said, leaning in, smiling big because he knew me. He knew I'd for sure be interested. I mean, if you weren't riding heavy in the mid to late 90s, then you won't understand how essential rims were. Cars and rims were hand in hand. Imagine wearing a nice outfit with some toe-up shoes or eating a lobster tail off a basic Dixie Ultra plate. In the mid to late 90s, it didn't matter what kind of car you drove or even how clean it was. If it wasn't sitting on something, then you wasn't doing shit. Hell yeah, I went to see what they're talking about. We can go see them. I looked over in the direction Robert had been staring. They definitely were some dudes we had seen before. When I think back on it all, I remember them being some ugly motherfuckers too. One dude in particular, he was just a real ugly ass nigga. I should have known he was up to no good. If God made a nigga that looked like that, then I should have known something was up. He couldn't have been getting any fucking with him. Hold on, he couldn't have been getting any fucking with his whole life. I should have known he was up to no good. We exchanged numbers and made plans with the guys to see the rims later that night. While we waited back at our apartment, I remember everything being eerily calm. Too calm. Most days folks would be stopping by or would be outside dribbling, talking shit. But not that night. That night me and Robert chilled on the couch watching ESPN reruns and didn't say much. It was a hot and humid late summer day. Might have been a Thursday. Our fans were being pushed to the limits and we couldn't drink enough water. I remember that hypnotic sound of the fan spinning. I wondered if the rims spun too. Wondered how large they were and which one of my cars they looked the meanest on. Before we left, I paced my bedroom. I don't think I was nervous. Maybe I was. I knew I was ready to get everything over with. I suppose there was some excitement in there somewhere, and then familiar silence settled in. A silence followed by a familiar voice that had been trying to break through. Listen, it's hard to explain something you have absolutely no reference for. Nobody ever talked about voices where I'm from. I would imagine if anybody had, the hood would have called them crazy and said they were on that shit. Probably would have asked them to dance like Gator in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. And while I couldn't explain what I was hearing, I knew it was from deep within. And wherever it was, I knew it felt familiar. It's something like me, not the voices of the folks in the neighborhood I grew up in. It wasn't the voice of the man down the street or the woman at the corner store. It wasn't the voice of my homeboys or the neighborhood old head. It wasn't the gas station attendant or one of my mama's boyfriends. The voice was different. The voice was in my head. The voice was trying to tell me something. The clock had hit the time we agreed on, and we headed to the apartment complex to see the rims. Before leaving, something told me to put some money in my sock. Don't put it in your pockets. Not this time. Not tonight. It also told me to put some money in my crotch. Put the rest in your pants. That's the new stash spot. Never take a situation for granted. Always be on point. And know that even the kindest nigga can turn on you. Even though I had no idea who the fuck was talking to me, I did what the voice told me to. The ride was calm. We rode with the windows cracked, and a cool little breeze flowed through the box Chevy. Robert's demeanor was normal. He drove with one hand on the wheel and a Newport in the other. I fired up a blunt and relaxed my shoulders. The closer we got to the complex, the more I started to smile. I had to get it out the way because I couldn't let them know I was too excited. I was about to be shining. Montgomery was about to have a problem on their hands. When we got back to the apartment building, which was in the trenches of Montgomery, we noticed a lot of streetlights were off or had been knocked out. It was dark, still muggy, very calm, no dogs barking or nothing. Didn't hear none of that. The guys had told us they'll meet us near the south side of the building. We had precise orders. Pull up in the parking lot on the north side of the building. Call us once you're parked. Walk up the steps in front, and there would be a walkway. Follow that to the back of the building. I remember seeing some OGs who nodded in our direction. You boys good? The complex was one of those multi-generational ones filled with black occupants. The ones where grandma lived on the third floor, her daughter lived on the second, and her daughter's ex-husband lived on the first. How clean you think these motherfuckers about to be? I said, looking over at Robert while we moved down the walkway. Shit, you about to be shining. I hope these Alabama bumpkins got their shades ready. We laughed. We eased around the side of the complex towards the back. The further we got from the box Chevy, the less excited I felt. My spirit was feeling a sense of unease, and I didn't know why. It's strange how a bunch of things can be happening all at once. How we can find ourselves walking, and with every step we tied to other outcomes than the ones we expected. The voice in my head was earlier had returned, and with every step we took, the voice got louder. The first thing the voice said to me was, "There are no rims. There are no rims." That came through as clear as anything I've ever heard in my life. When I heard it, I looked over at Robert, but his mouth wasn't moving. Knowing that it wasn't Robert speaking raised the volume of the voice in my head. We took another step, and the decibel grew louder. We took one more step, then boom. You know what the fuck time it is? Come on with the money, man. The voice barked out of nowhere. I almost thought he was joking, like it was some kind of prank just to fuck with us. I was confused because if he was serious, he had to know we knew who he was. There were several of them from earlier in the day. As expected, the ugliest of the ugliest niggas was the one doing the talking, the one holding the gun. Me and Robert stood frozen, not really knowing what to say or do. Nigga, did you hear what I just said? Come on with the motherfucking money, he said. Again, by this time raising the gun to the sky, then smashing it to the right side of Robert's head. Robert immediately hit a knee. And before I could say or do anything, the pistol was in my face. What money? Ain't nobody even got nothing. I pleaded, not making any eye contact. Nah, fuck that. Y'all niggas come off all that money. We just wanted to see the rims. We didn't even come here to get them. I felt the scratch of money against my ankles, the rustle of money against my balls. Don't fucking play with me. You niggas trying to get shot? Get your ass on the ground. He patted my pockets but didn't find anything. I laid on my stomach and wondered if this might be it for me. I thought of my mama, who was my best friend, and all of my people back home, everyone who celebrated me off to college. I thought of my pops and how he signed every letter with God is love. I laid on my stomach wondering where God was. Was he in Atlanta attending to some other business while I laid on my stomach about to lose my life? I shut my eyes and imagined a headline. Student athlete Tashid Epps found on the south side of an apartment complex in the middle of buttfuck Montgomery, Alabama. He was found with a band in his socks and a stash in his nuts. On October 23, 1989, a white Bostonian named Charles Stewart called 911 and reported that he and his wife had been shot. He told dispatch the couple were headed home from a childbirth class where a black man entered the car, demanded their property, and ultimately shot his pregnant wife, Carol, in the head and him in the stomach before fleeing. Now Charles was in such distress that he couldn't make out exactly where the couple was and eventually passed out as the dispatcher was working to get more information about their location. When the couple was finally found, it was near the Mission Hill neighborhood of Boston. Carol Stewart would die at Brigham and Women's Hospital later that night, but the baby would survive for over 2 weeks. Charles Stewart would survive the attack and identify the assailant as a black man in a tracksuit with stripes. This sparked a ton of racial tension. You had to think about it. In the mid-1970s, Boston experienced a ton of racial aggression over anti-abusing protests. This led to a number of black school children attending predominantly white schools being assaulted. In the 80s, when it came to racial matters, Boston was at best a delicate city. You can imagine the tension when its residents learned that a black man murdered a pregnant white woman and shot her unarmed husband right around the corner from the projects. There was no way this would end in justice without retribution. In attempted to hunt down the assailant, the police stormed the Mission Hill projects and terrorized the community in search of the black man wearing the tracksuit with stripes. The problem was this was during the time when Run DMC and other rappers had made Adidas striped tracksuits fashionable. If the police were looking for a black man wearing the outfit, they can throw a rock and hit one. There were reports of police busting down doors of black families and leaving homes in shambles. Many filed complaints talking about the ways their civil rights have been violated and the ways their sons have been profiled. For the people in Mission Hill community, the story never seemed right. They said it out loud to themselves. Let me get this shit straight. A black man in a tracksuit robbed a white couple and shot a pregnant woman in the head around the corner from the projects he fled to. And not only that, but the husband, who was much larger in stature than the wife, did not receive a fatal shot and lived to talk about it. This didn't sound right to all the Mission Hill community. As the investigation continued, several suspects had been interviewed and one publicly prosecuted. It wasn't until Charles Stewart's brother, Matthew, confessed to the police that Charles had actually shot both Carol and himself and staged it to look like a robbery. Matthew admitted how he assisted Charles in the plan by disposing of Carol's belongings and the gun that Charles used to shoot his wife in the head and himself in the stomach. The morning after Matthew confessed, that coward Charles Stewart jumped off the Tobin Bridge. I'm telling you, we don't have shit. I repeat over and over. Everything was happening so fast. At some point, they must have believed us. They ran off into the dark. Then it got quiet again. Me and Robert both on our stomachs, both breathing heavy. Robert, you good? You straight? Yeah, Ty, I'm good. Man, let's get the fuck up out of here. These guys tried to rob us and we know exactly who they were. That bothered me most. It was an attempted robbery because they didn't get anything from either of us. None of that mattered. I was hot. I wanted revenge. I wanted smoke. I'm from Atlanta, and I felt like the country ass niggas done tried me. I wanted to make an example out of them. Before word got around that I was sweet, I couldn't go out like that. The disrespect, I needed revenge bad. I didn't want a fist fight. I didn't want to square up. He drew his pistol on me. I wanted to draw a pistol on him. That's how I felt. I wanted my look back. As we left, we had the windows cracked. The ride back to our apartment was just as quiet as the ride as the attempted robbery. Robert was smoking a cigarette. I wasn't smoking nothing. I was just thinking. The nigga done tried us. I had drama thoughts in my head until we got back to our apartment. But my first call wasn't to my folks back home to discuss revenge. It wasn't to tell my nigga to armor up and get the asses over to Montgomery. It wasn't to put the trap on alert that it was time to go to war. Nope. That wasn't my first call. My first call went out to my best friend. My first call went to my mama. Mama, them niggas done tried to rob me. My voice shook as I was saying it. Lord have mercy. You all right, Robert? All right? Yeah, we good. I just shook up, you know? I'm sorry that happened to you, Ty. Don't go and do nothing crazy, okay? Why don't you come home and get away from Montgomery for a while? The next day, I drove to Atlanta with the intentions of gathering a crew to take back with me to handle the situation. While I was hashing out retaliation in my mama's kitchen, my pops called from prison because he heard about everything. Hey, Pop, these guys done tried to rob me and Robert. What you mean they tried to rob y'all? Yeah, we had went over to look at some rims and they upped the pistol on us. Hit Robert in the head and everything. Made us both get down. What you doing getting robbed at college? You supposed to be there in school. I know. The most fucked up part that we know who did it. What you mean you know who did it? Yeah, we know who did it. Some ugly ass local niggas. Son, listen to me carefully. You need to go get you a gun. That's what I was thinking. But I also have some people handle this for me. No, go get you a gun, handle it yourself. Walmart got guns. Walmart got shotguns. And you don't have to wait. You can buy them on the spot. There was a pause, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. I'm listening, Pop. After you get you a gun, you don't have to try and kill him. But he could die. It won't be your decision either way. Go get you a gun and some bullets. Then go find him. When you see who did it, don't think, just shoot. Shoot him in the stomach and let God decide. Yo. That was a deep lesson right there. That was a deep chapter. What do you think he did? You think Skinny Ty done shot them country ass niggas? What you think? Man? Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think he did. But that was a dope chapter. We'll be back with you for chapter 2 coming up soon, which is called Women Are Born Superheroes. Off to the next one.